Okay, so I'm going to give the talk now on the 7 bases of the mind and the use of mantra, just as I led in meditation just now. This is the heart of the technique. Before we go into the 7 bases itself, let's talk about your awareness. I like to use the word awareness. There's different ways, words you might use. You might use the word attention, but I'm going to use the word awareness here. It's the same thing. Awareness, it's not something we're particularly used to thinking about awareness or attention. This is what I'm going to emphasize on this. But awareness is movable. Movable meaning you can focus your attention, awareness in different places and move around where you're putting your attention. So, for example, I said to you, feel your left hand. You can feel how warm or cold your left hand is. Okay? Move your awareness to your right hand. Okay, you can move your awareness. That's what I mean by movable. Okay. So when we are relaxing the body in what's called a body scan, that's what we're doing. We're moving our awareness into each muscle, each group of muscles. We can focus our awareness in that. I don't say the word focus because that's going to be too strong a word, but we can be aware of it. You can really focus, but it's not going to be very relaxing if you do that. So you want to lightly pay attention. And as you'll find is when you move your awareness through there, if you notice any tension, you'll just relax it. But it's also resizable. So when I say you don't really want to focus it down because that can create tension, you want to keep it quite expansive. So if I said to you, for example, feel your whole left arm, you can feel the whole arm. If I said to you, feel the left hand, you can zoom in on the whole hand. If I said, feel the left thumb, you can zoom in again on just the thumb. Right? You're doing that right now, yeah? Okay. So it's expandable. It's like this camera in front of me, okay? Okay. It can zoom in or zoom out. Okay. It can also actually be divided. So when I was leading your body scan, I said relax your arms. Well, your arms are on different sides of the body here, okay? So you're putting awareness simultaneously on both sides. So if I say feel your hands, you can feel your hands at the same time. You can divide your awareness in this way, which is pretty useful for coordinating, okay? It's a little bit trickier, but you can do it. And when you're doing the body scan, it's up to you whether you want to relax one arm and then the other arm, one leg and then the other leg, or both at the same time. It's up to you. But you can divide your awareness. Actually, a form of meditation I did many, many years ago, a Taoist form of meditation, I had to divide my mind into about 16 to 20 different places at the same time. And it was possible. That's the strangest thing. Hard, but possible with practice. So our attention awareness can be divided. And nowadays we have to multitask so much it ends up being very divided. So it can also be shaped. But ordinarily, it will have a shape pretty much like this sphere. That is to say, you have a kind of broad awareness and a central focus awareness. Just as our eye, when we look at something, there's a central focus, which is very sharply focused, and there's the peripheral vision around. Okay, it's the same with our attention. So it can be shaped into a kind of sphere with a central focus. That's its general shape if you're not trying to make it a certain shape. But you can actually shape it by, like I said, if an arm shape, I mean, it forms the shape of your arm, your awareness. Okay, but you can actually practice shape it into different shapes, but not much use in that, but you can do it. Okay. It also is multi-dimensional. It takes a bit of practice, but in practice, you're always focusing your awareness in different channels or onto different things, whether it's different senses. Okay, listen to the sound. Feel the heat of your body. Feel the breathing. Okay. You can focus your awareness on different channels of awareness all the time. So it's like we have radio. And what you're doing all day long is basically switching channel of the radio continually, very quickly. Just like you're switching windows on the computer, like I've just been doing. Switch, switch, switch all the time. Okay. And you can choose which one you're going to focus it on, but we're not very good at focusing on it. It tends to flicker around by itself, and that's the problem with meditation, is it continually flickers onto different channels. So you're trying to meditate and suddenly you're listening instead of meditating. Okay, so it flickers out, and that's big challenge. It's a big challenge. Why does our mind not do what we want it to do? That's why we need to train the mind so that it can be more consciously directed. You can feel heat. So are you warm enough? Everybody warm enough today? Nobody's cold? Okay. So you can feel your heat. You can feel the heat of your body. You can feel when you're meditating where's tense or not tense. You can feel the sensations of the clothing. Is it constrictive? Is it soft? Or is it, and so on. The carpet, how soft and comfortable the carpet is, right? Yeah. Okay. So you can feel these. You can even feel more subtle things like the blood flowing in your body. You can feel your hand, and you can sometimes feel the pulse. If you put your attention along, you can feel the pulse. We can feel the heartbeat sometimes. And so you can actually feel blood, but with practice, you can feel more subtle things than this, which is, for example, sensing energy. In different traditions, they call it different things. If it was a Chinese tradition, acupuncture tradition, they would call it qi, which is where qigong, which is this energy work, comes from, or tai chi chuan, which is this form of martial art stroke health practice, which you see old Chinese men doing in the park in China. Okay, those practices are all there to build up energy, to balance energy, to clear energy blocks in the body, which also why they do those needles in you. Okay, so that's what the Chinese call it. If it was the Indian system, they would call it prana. And so when they're doing yogic postures, they're designed to clear energy meridians of what's called nadis in that system, and also to energize chakras, little wheels of energy. So anyway, these things can also be sensed, but it takes a lot of practice to develop those senses. But I've been sensing them ever since I was at university when I was teaching qigong and yoga, and so these things can be practiced. So you feel them as ordinary as you would your bones or your blood. And it can be just as simple as that. And it doesn't take very long, actually. So you can also sense externally and internally. This is a bit harder. I mean, you're already sensing externally all the time. When you hear a sound like the car outside, you're sensing externally. But what I mean here is not that. What I'm meaning here is when you meditate, you might start noticing that it's like you're expanding. Did anybody, even in this one, just this meditation here, feel that the boundaries of their body were getting blurred? Did anybody have a sense you had that? Yeah. It's like, where's the boundary here? What's going on here? What I mean is like I'm melting or merging into the environment around me. And in practice, it's like you're expanding. And you can even slip into a place where you're just a ball of awareness. And this awareness expands. Later on, we sometimes do this spreading loving kindness, and we do expand our awareness outwards to fill the whole room, the whole world even. So we can actually expand our awareness and sense externally. That's a bit deep, but let's just say that for a moment. We can also go internally. Normally, we find that a bit harder. We're so externally focused anyway in daily life that to focus internally, what's going on here? But isn't that amazing that we know so much about the external world, but know so little about ourselves, that we can't even put our awareness into the third base of the mind, inside the head, inside the brain. Even that's difficult, you know. But we can put our focus externally, no problem. So we can do both external and internal. It can sense this physical body, yes, the blood and bones and so on. But there are more subtle inner dimensions, and that's what happens when we're meditating, particularly in this style of meditation. It's very unique in this. When we focus our mind on the center of the body, it just tunes us up. Even when we go through those 7 bases that I just led you on, okay, you'll find that the awareness is changing its quality as we went through all 7. Particularly as you get more practice, it gets softer and it seems to be more expansive, and then the body starts disappearing, or sometimes it disappears completely, and these kind of things can happen. Particularly as it gets to the 7th base, then this happens more. And so what happens when the body disappears, which almost everybody gets this experience at some time or another in meditation, sometimes almost every time. So if the body has disappeared, then what's left? Right? But there is something left, and it's awareness. Awareness of what? That's a deep question. That's what I'm going to call this the subtle inner dimensions. and it actually has, there's a lot there. It's very deep, and in fact, it's almost infinitely deep, and how high and inwards you can go in this. And that's what we're doing in this form of meditation. We're going inside. Here's a picture I've been describing, which puts together both the Indian system and the Chinese system, and also so almost you could say the Western system now, which is the Western system seems to be focusing more on the aura, so external again, but still pretty close to us. Many of the psychics, always say, I can see your aura or whatever. But you don't need a psychic nowadays to see this. There's cameras that can show it for you. But here's a picture of the 7 chakras. There's energy, the different color circles along the body. That's from the yoga tradition. Then they see these lines coming down the chest, for example, down the arms. That's the acupuncture meridians that they're using. And so they put them together, and then the aura around it. But here's, for example, Western technology doing live video of the aura. Basically, it's a certain electromagnetic frequency, as is the acupuncture meridians. They are now able to have a little electronic gadget go beep when it hits the acupuncture point. So now they don't really need much training to find the points. They just move the little thing, goes beep, and put in the needle there. It checks the electrical conductivity of the skin and the resistance to the electrical conductivity there. So it's all electrical properties we're dealing with here. It's subtle energies, just as we've got brain waves of electromagnetic frequencies around our head in the EEG that we check on our head. This is the same kind of thing. These are just different frequencies that they're sensing and tuning into. But you can also sense these with practice. Some people more so than others. But here on the left is a picture of the Indian system of chakras, little vortexes of energy coming out of the body, and certain central, you see in particular, this is why I think it's a very interesting picture. You see the vortex at the top of the head there on the picture on the left there? And it's a line that goes down from there through the center of the body, and then has another vortex at the perineum, at the base of the body. And that is what's called the central channel, and it's used in both the Chinese tradition, which is on the right, and the Indian tradition that's on the left. They both have this, okay? You see on the right also, there's a central channel there. In our tradition, we're also focusing our mind along the same energy channel, central channel. Okay. This here is an old picture now from the founder, time of the founder of this meditation tradition. This is the pathway within. There's many of these energy channels, but this is the channel that leads you inwards. Okay, all the other ones are all on the surface of the body and dealing with the external world, linking to the external world. This is about going inwards. This is inwards. This is the very unique thing about it. So when we talk about these 7 bases of mind, we're not talking about physical things. I mean, the center of the body, that's intestines. I mean, what you're going to find there in your intestines. We're not dealing with it on that level, all right? We're dealing with something on a subtle level. And these 7 bases are leading to more subtle parts of our anatomy, of our inner energy anatomy or energy body. What's commonly called in the West nowadays, they call it the etheric body or the energy body. Okay, so looking at these bases, just to recap, first base of the mind is at the right nostril for men and the left nostril for ladies. I always get asked, why is it different? The simple answer is why are men different to ladies? I mean, we are different, but I find that's interesting thing is that it's different on the surface, but that once we reach the 3rd base of the mind, which is the one that's internal, the first one that's internal, men and women are the same on this. So I find it interesting that there's only differences there on the surface, on the external, but not on the internal. I find that quite an interesting psychological fact. So then we have the inside corner of the eye. So we go straight up and right at the inside corner of the eye. Okay. That's the second base of the mind. Again, different for men and ladies, right and left. Then we come back, straight back and in on the same level as the eyes, the same level as where we were, straight back, which roughly is about the top of the ears as it works out, but in the center of the head. So if there's a line coming from the nose going backwards, from the tops of the ears, and also from the crown going downwards along that central channel of energy that I pointed out earlier, and you can see on the picture there, that's where the third base of the mind is, right in the center of the head. The fourth base of the mind is slightly down at the level of the upper palate. So if you put your tongue to the top of your mouth, put it all the way back, you'll be touching on it. And then we have the top of the throat for the fifth base of the mind, but it's not at the throat chakra. For those people who know the Indian system, it's not down here. It's above the Adam's apple, if you've got one, and in the center of the throat, in the center. And then we go down to the sixth base at the level of the navel on a straight line downwards. So it doesn't matter how fat you get, it'll still be in the same place. It's not going to go forwards. So people worry about that. So in the same place, it's straight down from the other ones, the third, the fourth, the fifth. And then 2 finger widths above. So if you put your fingers together, it'll be 2 finger widths above, about 1 inch or so, up from the level of the sixth base of the body, from above the navel. That's the final one, the seventh base of the mind, which is the important one. Now you'll see also here, I've said that they're responsible for different senses as well. The first one is just the entrance. It's just the entrance. It's where the mind comes in and out. But the second one is already responsible for the sense of smell, and basically corresponding to our external senses here. Sense of smell. The next one is the third is the sense of sight. Come down to the fourth, the sense of hearing. Coming down to the fifth is the sense of taste. Sixth one, touch. The seventh one is the key one, though. This is withdrawing the senses and now coming into the mind. And the seventh one will go on to describe why this is an important one. This whole discovery, and I say discovery, was rediscovery would be a better word, was by Lombo Wat Nam, a very famous meditation master, founder of this meditation tradition. He's passed away about 50 so years ago, more than that now. And hear him very classic, showing just what I'm teaching you right now. He didn't have PowerPoint in those days, so he had to use a wooden stick and to point it out on a chalkboard, pointing out, and it's very famous because he's literally pointing out how to reach nirvana, because in what he was teaching was that the center of the body is the doorway to nirvana. If one presses one's mind there, nirvana being the ultimate thing in Buddhism, okay? And he put it down to a location, that if the mind was placed in a certain place, it can enter upon nirvana if done correctly. So this is quite a revolution. But we find, we looked at the history of it, where he learned, who he learned from, and he pieced together various different things, including these locations of the body from other places as well. For example, the ancient system of Yoga Vajra, very little known about, but is now a heavy subject of academic research in Buddhism. Many professors are now looking into this. This picture is on the right, is several hundred years old, and was detailing this ancient system of meditation where they would focus on different points of the body. And many different traditions do focus on different points of the body. I talked about yoga and how they focus on the chakras. Okay, 7 chakras, and they put their attention on that. I've done that one. I've done that a lot. In Qigong, meditative forms of Qigong, you put your focus on, say, for example, the dantian in the lower abdomen, or in various different points, and I mean various lots of different points. I've done that one as well. I've focused on countless different points in my body, and I found that you get a different result on every one of them. It's really strange. But it shouldn't be that strange, because if I poke you in one location, it doesn't mean I'm going to get the same result if I poke you somewhere else. You poke someone in the eye, you'll get a very different result, okay, to somewhere else. So they have different effects when we put our mind in different places. And Lomba Wat Nam, he experimented with them all that were being traditionally handed down. And he found, and his teacher also had found, that the center one, at the center of the body, had a very different effect. And it's just that Lomba Wat Nam went systematized the 7 bases and the part using it as a pathway inwards, and that how deep you can go when you do focus on the center of the body, which is what this tradition is known for as the center of the body, and revealing what we mean by the middle way. We found out that there's a deeper meaning to this idea of the middle, of the center here. This spot has many different aspects to it. We say that when you're falling asleep, the mind will retreat from the external world, unless you have insomnia and then you're thinking about the external world and you can't let go of it, which I've talked about on the first week. But if you can let go of it, then the mind will go inwards to the center of the body, and then you can fall asleep. And when you wake up, the mind will come out from the center of the body and go along these 7 bases and out and seek about this person and that thing, what I have to do today, and so on. It can go back into the external world. But it is also, we're getting a bit deep now, it is also what we call the place of conception. And so in Buddhism, as you're probably aware of, Buddhism talks about past lives and so on, future lives. And we say that the reincarnating spirit, for want of a better word, not the right word, but it's for want of a better word, this mind will come into the man before it comes into the female. Now, this is very strange. Okay, and it says to go in through the right nostril of the man, and then goes through the 7 bases of the man, stays in the center of the body until the moment, okay, the big moment of conception. And then it goes back through the 7 bases of the man, out through the nostril, and then enters through the nostril of the lady. If it goes through the left nostril of the lady, the child will have the gender of being female. If it goes through, then it will be born as a male. The gender, if we say, we found, meditators have found that it's determined by this. And then it goes through those 7 bases of the body, which is basically where the uterus is, and then where the baby spends the first 9 months of its life at the center of the body. And then in the Bali scriptures, it refers to this kind of a word as yoniso, meaning focusing on what the yoni, or the uterus. It's a very key place. It's the place where we're from. It's our source. It's our origin, the center. And so the center of the child's body, it gets basically in the same kind of location as the center of the mum's body. So it has a very key place. Also, we say that when we the mind first comes to the center of the body, and then, for generally speaking, it will exit through these 7 bases, out through the nostril, and then search for its next rebirth, so to speak. There's much more detail on that, but not on a beginner's night. But interestingly, that for those who have the goal of the highest goal in Buddhism, which is to not be reborn, then it involves keeping the mind focused at the center of the body and going inwards at death instead of outwards. And that is how one can then not be reborn again and to attain to nirvana. So that's why it becomes very important on a spiritual, deep spiritual level. But you can, don't pay attention to that too much. But this is the bit that's important here, is it's the balance point. When we focus our mind here, it allows the whole mind to come into balance. I give the analogy here of, say I had a ruler and rested it on my finger. If you place it in the middle, it can balance there. But if it was off the center, then it cannot balance. When it is at the center and it balances, it can become still. When it's balanced, it becomes still. And so what happens here is very strange, is that when you do place your mind here, the mind is quite easy, relatively speaking, to still the mind, to have it stop thinking. Whereas there are various forms of meditation which outright say that you cannot stop the mind because it's very difficult. But when you do focus mind on this point, it does become quite easy sometimes to stop the mind. I'm just not saying there's no hindrances to it, but it's certainly much more easy to still the mind here than anywhere else. And when it's stopped, and you're no longer thinking, then there are no what we call defilements of the mind. In particular, there's no greed. You're not thinking about greedy things. You're not angry. There's no delusion because you're not thinking at all. So the main defilements of the mind, which make the mind dark, which make the mind unhappy and have suffering and so on, they're no longer present. And so the mind is in a pure state. And the longer that you're in that state, the purer the mind becomes, and it cleans itself. It becomes purer and purer and purer. And that reflects in various different phenomena which then occur. For example, you get happy, but you also get these early experiences of expanding, of becoming softer, the body disappearing. These are aspects of the refinement of awareness as it becomes purer, until it gets so refined that, like, the vibration of it's getting so highly vibrating, it just gets too refined for the body. The body's gone. The body's like disappeared now. There's just awareness, and it keeps on expanding, and it gets bright light, it gets happiness, it gets joy, and it keeps on developing and developing until it's like this gets too much for this dimension, for this whole world. And then this doorway opens up into the inner realms, and what we call inner dimensions. That's the only words I can use for it. Very deep meditation. I'll talk about maybe on a Thursday or Tuesday night sometime a bit later, but there's so much more levels to it after that. But that's what happens at the center of the body. It opens up this doorway to what we call the middle way. It opens up a tunnel inside. It's experienced as like a tunnel that leads through the inner self to nirvana. Okay. But let's not go too much into that right now. Okay, the center of the body. When we place our awareness there, you have to not like there's wrong ways to do it and there's right ways to do it. Again, that's half the art of this technique. Even when you got there, some people will really focus very hard on it. Okay, and so it doesn't have the delicacy, and so you get tense. You tense up the belly, and the eyes around the eyes get tense, and so on. You want to be soft, delicate. I use the word baggy. Okay, your mind is not focused down onto a point yet. Don't worry about it like that. Or where's the exact center of the body? It's 2 fingers. It's not 3. It's not 4. Am I above? Am I too far down? Am I at the dantian at the below the navel? Am I above? These kind of things. Don't worry about it. Keep it big. Fill up your belly. Okay, then you can't miss. All right, because in practice your awareness is quite big. It's quite spacious. Keep it like that, and then it'll be softer. Don't pay full attention to it. It's not like you're concentrating on an exam or concentrating on me and you're really focusing on exactly what I'm saying. Right? It's not like that. You're paying the slightest bit of attention to it. You're paying only a little bit of attention to it. Otherwise, it'll be too heavy. That's really different, okay? You're not really concentrating on it, no. You're just staying in touch with it a little bit. When it disappears, you notice that, oh, I've forgotten about it completely, and then you touch your awareness to it again. And it'll stay there for a while. It's wandered off again, oh, and then you touch it again. It's a bit like that until it stays there. So you're getting a sense of connection with it. I've tried doing like touch, 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 and it gets uncomfortable. You just want to, when it moves away, bring your awareness back. It's as simple as that. Okay, so you can stay continuously connected with it. If you pay partial attention, it will be softer. But if you start staring at it, and I mean physically staring at it, and many people literally look down, cross their eyes, and so on, and they get very uncomfortable because they get tension around the eye area. That's the incorrect technique. You don't want to look at it. That's why I say you don't even pay much attention to it. You're not even staring at it with your mental eye, because sometimes you see colors, like somebody was talking about. Don't pay attention to them. Imagine that they're not there. Pay no attention to it. Otherwise, you might focus too hard on it, and then it gets uncomfortable, and it will draw you out of the meditation. So we have to be indifferent. Very key point. No, analyzing. If you're analyzing it, then you're now focusing on it, and then it'll also disappear. You're starting to think as well. So just Be soft, pay a little bit of attention and bring it back, and it will start to stay. So that's about placing the awareness there. It's all about the mantra. We have a mantra, and initially, if you're a beginner, you might struggle to remember it. Don't worry, I'll give you some other ones. But here is it written down, so you can try and remember it now. Look at it. Sam, ma, ra, hung. And entirely, they have 5 sounds, but you can do it just in their ordinary. Sama, arahang. Okay, that doesn't matter. This word, and that below is a picture in the Cambodian language, the ancient Cambodian language of the same word, Sama, arahang. What does it mean? Samma is an ancient Bali language word, the language of the Lord Buddha, meaning rightly or fully. And it's one of the qualities of the Buddha. We say he was fully self-enlightened, and that was using Samma. It can also, when we talk about the Noble Eightfold Path, later on I'll talk about that sometime, we talk about right action or right livelihood. That word right here is, again, the word Samma. I like to translate it as perfectly. I find it gets the sense of these two together, and it's quite poetic later on. Arahang means far from defilements. So no greed, no hatred, no anger, no delusion, far from all of that. It's in purity. It's about purity. Again, it's one of the qualities of the Lord Buddha. So put them together, what do you get? I get perfectly pure. And you could use that as well, if you like, as a mantra. If you want to use English, you can use it perfectly pure, perfectly pure. But there are some that people do use in English quite commonly. A lot of people use clear and bright, because later on we're visualizing a crystal ball like this. And so they'll use the mantra clear and bright, clear and bright. That's very popular by Westerners. I don't like it so much. I find it's a bit long, but a lot of people do use it. You can basically use anything that's positive and that has a good effect. You don't want to say dark and murky, you know, or hate. It's not going to put you in a good mood, all right? I sometimes have used a mantra according to my mood. So if I'm finding my mind is all over the place, I could use a word like calm, calm, calm. Or if I find I'm holding on to things, I might change it to let go, let go, let go. There was a Western monk who said he used for the first 2 years, he just used one mantra, let go. I can understand why. You know, you've got a lot of things to let go of when you're ordained. Calm, I find it works well. It's a nice little one. It's short. It's easy to remember. You can use that one too. Next one. Let go, like I said, you can use that one. You can think of your own one. Softly, softly, softly. That's a nice one to get that delicacy. You can try that. Be creative. A lot of children have come up with all sorts of ones themselves. But try and make it positive, pure. But it's all about how you use it that's important. Subtle use of mantra. That's probably going to be difficult to see, even for me. I'll read it out loud to you. There's a more external way of using it and a more internal way of using it, or a gross way or a subtle way. For example, it's very famous use of one particular mantra, and everybody knows these kind of yogic type of mantra. That's externally vocalizing it. They sit in a group and vocalize the sound. That is not going to take you into deep meditation because you're still moving, you know. So if you're still moving, you're not going to get the heart rate down, the breathing down. You're not going to get into deep delta brain waves or so on. So that's an external form where you bring it. We're not saying Samma Arahang. We're saying it in our mind. It's an internal thing. If you're using conscious willpower, that means like when you're meditating, you go Sam, what's the next one? Ma. What was it again? Arahang, yeah? And that's using your mind. You're consciously having intention to do it. When it becomes more subtle, it should be subconscious. It should just repeat by itself. Instead of being a word, it just comes as a never-ending sound of samarang, 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 samarang. It just becomes a whole long sound with no need to consciously start each word. Okay. That's really important here. That's going to make it much more subtle and soft. some people who try to use the mantra fast, if they get a lot of thoughts, they're like fighting their thoughts. They're going, samma arhang, samma arhang, samma arhang, trying to overcome their thoughts, get into a battle with it. That's going to get you tense and not going to get you relaxed. Okay, let it happen at its own speed. Okay, which probably won't be quite as fast as that. Some people will count the mantras. That's a good technique, particularly when you're not meditating. As a mindfulness technique, you're walking to work. I know some of the regulars have started doing that when they walk to work, or they do hoovering or something. Samarahang 1, Samarahang 2, Samarahang 3 in the mind. Okay? It's a good way of practicing mindfulness and keeping the mind pure. But when it comes to meditation, I find it's not so good. Okay? It can be good in the beginning, but it's not going to be as subtle as not counting. So that's another one. Some people in some traditions use what's called mala beads, particularly rosary, okay, for doing their mantras or the Holy Marys or whatever it is. I don't know. But again, you're making physical effort, so the blood, the breathing, and so on is not going to be as calm and still as if you're not using them. You're not reciting the mantra. We can come back to intention. You're more, it says here, listening to mantra. At the beginning, you will listen to the mantra, listen to the whole sound. So you're not being the doer. You're being the passive listener to a sound that's already there in the background. You understand me? You got the subconscious doing it, and then you're just listening in on it. That's different to being the active doer of the sound, right? But you'll only listen to it really when you got a lot of thoughts going on. And you instead of getting involved in those thoughts, you want to have something else to focus on. So you start listening in on the mantra. But if the thoughts go more into the background, you can sort of stop listening to the mantra as well. It'd be there, but you're not focusing on it. You're letting them both be in the background, both thoughts and mantra in the background. You just have this awareness of whether there is still a mantra or not, because it's being automatic here. But instead of it just being focusing on each individual mantra, it just becomes this long sound of samarang, samarang, samarang. It just becomes a sound of the mantra, an awareness of whether that has stopped or started. And it will stop. The idea of it is it should stop at some point, but it's not easy. Okay, it doesn't happen first time, but it will stop because the mind will have stopped. It'll have done its job. Okay. Though you'll feel like you don't need to use the mantra anymore. You'll go into stillness of the mind. There'll be a little gap. Won't last very long initially. You'll go, oh, I've stopped thinking, and then you'll start thinking again. So, but it'll get longer, the gap. It'll get longer. So yeah, it should stop. But sometimes you'll want to cease using the mantra, even though you haven't stopped thinking. But you just feel like, I can ignore it. It's in the background. I just want to be still. That's okay too. It means it's done its job. The mantra is really good when you're in the state of beta or alpha. But once you start going into theta brainwaves, which is what I talk in much more depth on the meditation retreat, like I did on Saturday, when you're in theta, it's no good. You don't need it. Okay. So there'll be a time when you'll just not feel like using it. That's okay. Ditch it at that time and just be still and be neutral and let it unfold. Okay. That's more or less what we've got there. So it will fade out, it will disappear, and the mind will become still. And when the mind becomes still, that's when things start happening. The more the mind becomes still and the longer it gets still for, the more things start happening. Okay, whether the awareness expands as it does for a lot of people initially, or it gets merged with the environment and so on, or later on, it can be, like I said, things like light and so on. And then usually it then taps into feelings of peace and happiness, and then later on bliss and ecstasy.